Hey again, everybody, this is Justin. This time coming to you with a request tutorial, just kind of a simple overview of the pen tool. One of those things that for some reason a lot of my students have trouble with when they first start getting into using the Adobe suite in Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. Keep in mind the tools are a little bit different in each program, whichever one you're using. In my opinion, Illustrator's probably got the best usage. But let me go ahead and just make a new canvas here and show you some different usages of the pen tool. I'm just going to open up a photo and we're going to just do a little bit of work with a photo. Let me get one where there's somebody I can crop just to show you some of the ideas behind this here. Okay, so let's just say, for instance, we're going to use the pen tool to do a couple things in Photoshop. First thing right off the bat, why use the pen tool? There's a couple different reasons why you'd use this. You can use the pen tool obviously to draw. That's one of the primary usages of it if you wanted some kind of free-form lines. Really the whole point of the pen tool is to make nice, smooth, flowing curves. Otherwise you could use some other tools if you weren't trying to do that with it, but that's the point of this, is nice, smooth curves. Pen tool itself has some different aspects when you roll over it. You've got the pen tool, freeform pen, add, anchor point, delete anchor point, and convert anchor point. And I'm just going to kind of cover these as we go. Just basic pen tool stuff here. One of the usages of this, obviously, to draw. So now, when you're using your pen tool, one thing you have to keep in mind is that we have a couple different functions here, and this actually illustrates why you'd use this. Really, your two major functions of the pen tool are for drawing and for cropping, and that's kind of these two modes up here. You've got shape tool, which will let you draw shapes, like remember those vector shapes in Photoshop, and the path tool, which will let you make selections with it, which is another huge point of using this pen tool. So obviously, just kind of the simple usage stuff. I'm going to select shape here, and I can select a fill or a stroke, obviously. So let's just do white fill, no stroke. All your settings up here, and basic things here. Every time you click, it sets an anchor point or a vertex. So the more times you click, if I just plain old click here, this thing will make shape. If you go back to where you started, always keep an eye on the icons next to your pen tools here. You can see if I roll over the first vertex I created, it's a little plus, or it's a little circle shape, which means you're closing your shape. And now I've got a self-contained shape, which is made as an object in the layers panel. Now, whenever you draw with this pen tool, again, this actually is a good chance to just illustrate this. The pen tool, if you notice, one of the very important things about the pen tool here is that it's kind of a multifaceted thing. All of these bits, the add, subtract, freeform, convert, are kind of built into the pen tool natively, and you can access those with keyboard shortcuts or with just clicking on different portions of a path that or a shape that you've just drawn. For instance, if we roll over a line here, a segment that's been created by these 2 points, these anchor points, it'll give us a plus, which adds a vertex. Okay, adds a point inside there, an anchor point. So any place where you get a plus, it's adding an anchor point. Now, important thing here, you've got really two kinds of points here. You've got these kind of square corner points, these points here, and then you got these points at the handles, which are called Bezier points. Now, once you've drawn something with a pen tool, one thing I'm going to do here is it works in conjunction with the path selection tool down here, the regular path selection and the direct selection tool. I'm going to use the direct selection to just kind of show you some of the properties of this. So direct selection tool, when you select this, now the regular selection tool here, the path selection tool lets you select that whole shape. Direct selection tool lets you select individual anchor points that you've drawn here. See? So if you notice, one thing I can do here is if I'm selecting these and moving these, you can modify anything that you've drawn since it's all vector. Okay, you can select it and you can add points to it to modify it. The points that I added secondarily, notice here, okay, you have your corner points here, which are straight lines. Like this is a great example down here. They make a sharp corner. That's the default. The Bezier curves are the ones with the handles. Now this is probably the thing that throws off the most people is the Bezier curves. To really understand this, you got to realize that what you get here is you get yourself an anchor point that you've just created. You have these two handles which will let you modify the curve of this Bezier point. Very simply, to illustrate this, you can grab one of these. Now you can move this in a 360 inward and outward. If you drag to the right, it'll modify or left, any direction that you're dragging here, it'll modify the handle that you've got selected. The longer the handle, the more sharp the curve. See, the more drastic the curve. If I can do the same thing on the opposite side, Okay, notice it's affecting the entire curve of this thing. If you can get used to using this, now this is one thing I just encourage people to do when they first start drawing this, is just draw out a random shape and just look at how these Bezier points work. Being able to trace a good curve is one of the most important things whenever you start using this pen tool for accuracy. So just get in there and start tweaking that thing and moving it around and see how it works. A couple of tricks here. If you hold down Alt, something a lot of people don't know, if you hold down Alt or Option on Mac here, when you grab one of these handles, it will adjust half of this curve. So you can actually get in here and adjust these points, these kind of Bezier curves individually if you hold down Alt. So that's kind of a cool usage of that a lot of people don't know. Going back to the pen tool real quick. So if you've gone through and I've added that point, I've messed it all up, and I want to get rid of it, I can go back to my delete anchor point tool. And there's all kinds of keyboard shortcuts for this that I would encourage you to get familiar with as well. Say I don't like this point, I can roll over it with the pen tool here and hit that, and away it goes. Okay. Keyboard shortcut for this is if you're on your plain old pen tool here, you can just hit minus on your keyboard and it will automatically go to the subtract keyboard tool over here, or subtract anchor point. So there you go. I've gotten rid of a bunch of anchor points. You can always plus, and notice it just snaps to that. You can add those back in and move them, adjust them on the fly. So drawing shapes, again, that's one of the things that the pen tool does. Just kind of want to show you one more tool for this. Convert anchor point tool. If you've drawn a corner point or a Bezier point and you want to convert it to the opposite, you can click and drag with this convert anchor point tool, or single click it and it will convert it from one to the next. See how that converts from a Bezier? If I drag and I single click it, it goes back to a corner point. So there you go. That's the basics of the pen tool when drawing shapes. Okay, kind of vector shapes from scratch. Other things you can do really quickly. Now, it all kind of works the same way, but I'm just going to go ahead and dump that layer. The other point of this is for making selections that you'd want to reselect, essentially saving selections. Now, normally when you'd make selections to crop something, a lot of people will use masking, they'll use the polygon or the lasso tools, something of that nature. A little more advanced way is by using the pen tool, and there's a lot of instances why you'd want to do this, is to make a path for something. And export a path. You can actually bring paths into Illustrator as well. So I'm going to go ahead and use the pen tool, and I'm going to crop out a path for this helmet. So using my pen tool, here we go, I'm just going to lay down some points. So again, click to make straight points, click and drag to make Bezier curves. Now, I've got this set to shape up here. I'm going to go ahead and Control Z that back. I wasn't paying attention when I did it. I'm going to move this back to path because I don't need a shape, I need a path. I'll show you the point of this here in a second. And this is going to be a pretty loose crop, just telling you right now, because I don't want to sit here and make a much more involved crop. Actually, this will illustrate why you'd want to use this tool. But this is going to be a pretty sloppy crop job here, just letting you know right off the bat. So click and drag to make your Bezier curves. And I'm going to go back to where I started and kind of finish out the selection on this helmet. So now I've drawn kind of a crop around this helmet. You can use the direct selection tool here to go back in and modify. Like if this point right here needs a little bit, let me zoom in a little bit here, needs a little bit of modification. See how I don't quite have those pixels selected. I can always go back in and modify it. That's another point of using this. I can really perfect my crop. Like right here, I probably should convert this to a Bezier curve instead of a corner point here so that it's a little bit more smooth of a curve. So one leg up over using the lasso tool is I can go in and I can remodify this. Now I can have a much more accurate crop than I had just a minute ago, or a selection. There we go. That's better. Not great, but it's better. Okay. So now that I've got this path drawn, here's what happens. And a lot of people have no idea what's even in this palette. This is really useful in Photoshop. There's a paths palette. So when you draw using a path with the pen tool, it creates what's called a work path here. Now, what's the point of this? I can just go on to do something else. I could color correct. I could do something else. This selection remains here. This stays in my palette over here. Anytime I want to make a selection of this helmet, say I want to go back in 20 steps later and make the selection, check this out. I can go back in and I can make this selection. Bingo. Okay, and I can feather it if I wanted a good crop. Maybe it'll just do a 2-pixel feather. Bingo. Now this helmet has been selected. I can copy it and paste it at any point in time. If you were just making a regular selection here. Okay, let me go back and really select this thing. Let's do it here. Make selection. Let me select my path here. Make selection. There we go. 2 pixels. Layers. All right, unlock my layer. There we go. Now I can copy and paste. There we go. So that's the point of this thing, is that this selection, I can go back in. You can actually just command click it here too. And I'll just go ahead and paint bucket so you can see the selection on this thing. You can select this at any point in time. There you go. And that selection remains in your canvas. That's the idea. So a couple other things we can do this aside from making that selection and just saving it inside here. I could name this like helmet selection. I could go in and I could export this selection to Illustrator. Let's say, for instance, I've gone through and I've made the selection. I wanted to create, maybe you've traced out an entire silhouette, and you wanted to make this thing a selection in Illustrator, and I want to make it vector. You can do File, and you can export your paths to Illustrator, which is pretty cool. That'll actually take anything I've got inside my paths palette over here and will export that shape as an Illustrator document. It'll be a stroke essentially in Illustrator that I can go in and set up. But that comes in handy for all kinds of stuff. Like I do that all the time at my design job for vinyl cutting. So a lot of times you'll have these big vinyl stickers you have to put on, like we do race boats and things of that nature, cars, and they'll need this path outlined, and then you export that in Illustrator, and they can put it on a plotting cutting machine that will cut out that vinyl. So there's kind of some usages of the pen tool, gives you an idea, but really the key with this is getting familiar with using those corner points and those Bezier points and tracing some stuff out. I'd encourage you just to go in and trace some stuff out and crop it and get used to using the pen tool for that. That'll really sharpen up your skills. So hope you enjoyed it. Anything else, again, as always, if you want to see anything specific, just email me, justincussman@gmail.com, and I'll do my best to get the tutorial up as quick as I can. All right, have a good one.